Notre Dame versus Georgia in the college football playoffs. And to break it down from the Bulldogs angle, we got Jake Rowe over from Dogs HQ. He's going to tell us everything we need to know about Notre Dame's opponents in the college football playoff quarterfinals. Folks, go ahead and hit the thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content. And of course, head over to blueandgold.com and Dogs HQ, both members of the On3 network, for more information on both teams. So, Jake, I'm just curious, like going into this game, what is the pulse of this Georgia football team? You can really take this many different directions, but whether it's scrolling the message board, whether it's what the general consensus is within the Dogs HQ staff, like just how you guys feeling going into this game? Do you guys feel pretty confident?
I would say it's hard to feel super confident. It really is hard to be anything other than middle of the road if you're a Georgia fan, because without a shadow of a doubt, they come out there, they play well. There's not a lot of teams that can do anything about it. There's a handful of teams in the country that can go out there and say, hey, Georgia, play your best, and we can handle it. But Georgia has given nobody any reason to think they're going to do that over and over and over again this year, or even just for a whole football game. They've done what it's taken what it's taken to get them where they're at. But it's taken last-minute heroics. It's taken near miraculous plays to be made like they've needed them. And then they've also kind of turned it on and just ran away from some good teams too. I mean, you look at Clemson and Tennessee. So it's really they're battle-tested. I think Georgia fans know they can play with anybody. I think they know that even with a slow start, they're in pretty much every game they play. They came back from 28 points down in Tuscaloosa earlier this year to eventually lose, but retook a lead. It's just so tough to bank on any one thing about this Georgia team other than the fact that it's not going to quit. But I do think there's some optimism in two things going into the playoffs. One, Georgia's healthier than it has been all year, and we'll get into that. And then two, the big thing you're hoping is that, hey, every snap you take, your back's against the wall now. So you're hoping that that's kind of what this team needs to maybe put its best foot forward.
All right, you bring up the health situation, which is interesting considering that, of course, Carson Beck is out. We're going to see Gunnar Stockton start. So, tell me about the Georgia offense. What should Notre Dame fans know about that group? And then I'm definitely curious for your thoughts about this quarterback situation. It's kind of like how big of a knock is it at all with Gunnar starting on January 1st?
I do think Georgia's a better offense with Carson Beck at quarterback. Like, I'm not going to be one of those people. I mean, Carson was starting for a reason. Carson he does some things that I don't think you believe Gunnar can do yet, which is he can throw you back into football games, and he can put some stuff together for you. He had a stretch this season where he struggled, but he showed a lot of fight. He showed a lot of desire to win, a lot of grit, a lot of toughness, all stuff that helped Georgia win. Now, Gunnar brings a different element to the table, and he's a better runner. He kind of spreads teams out and puts a little bit more stress on them as a runner, as a designed quarterback run guy. He's athletic. He throws really well on the run. And in a lot of ways, Georgia, and I'm sure Notre Dame is kind of built this same way. I felt like I saw the same thing happen in the Indiana game when the defensive tackle, the kid that's hurt now, went down. They tend to just kind of rally around guys when guys get hurt. Like, they just tend to step their game up. And that's what they did for Gunnar. And I do think it can be good for Georgia in this very compartmentalized way. Is I think sometimes, whether it's from a play calling standpoint or a player standpoint or what, Carson kind of became that look to, hey, dude, make a play. You're Carson Beck. You need to make a play. And I think when Gunnar came in, I almost think it kind of reminded Georgia, like, hey, we got to come together and win this thing. We got to come together and do this. And they played so much better as a football team, as an offense around them. There was a focus. And I think that helped Georgia a lot. Now, from a health standpoint, you're right. Carson, that is a big injury, and that is one place where Georgia's not healthier. But offensive line-wise, I mean, Georgia had five guys, and two of those guys weren't really practicing a whole lot during the week. They're late in the season. And now they've kind of gotten mushroomed back out to their 7 or 8 guys with some time off to heal. Trevor Etienne is back and is at full strength, and Nate Frazier's right there. Roderick Robinson. There was a one point this year, Georgia had Nate Frazier, true freshman tailback, was the only option they had at tailback. So as far as scholarship guys, So that they are more healthy at tailback. They're more healthy at on the offensive line. And I think that kind of helps Georgia do something, Mike, that it has struggled to do all season long. And that's run the ball early. And that's why they keep getting off to these slow starts.
Jake, can you give me like 30 seconds on the receivers? Like how much because Notre Dame has had some losses in the secondary throughout the season. What, like, are the receivers pretty good at Georgia?
Well, I would like to insert my Georgia fan joke here, which is we know that they'll be healthy come time for the Sugar Bowl because they won't catch a cold. That's for sure. No, they've had a lot of drops this year. Georgia fans have beaten up on them a lot. They've had a lot of drops. Arian Smith has 11, but somehow still catches 65% of his targets, which is just wild to think of. That's how open he gets. But Arian Smith has dropped 11 passes. Dominic Lovett's dropped 8 or 9. Dylan Bell's dropped 7 or 8. They don't catch the ball consistently, and it's been weird, Mike, because they drop it early in ball games and then they catch everything late. So they whenever Georgia's got to have it, they do it, but they get Georgia in a hole by not catching it early.
Defensively, what do we need to know about the Bulldogs? I know Jalen Walker, the linebacker, is a stud.
When they start, when there's a mode they get into, and again, I don't know when it's coming. I don't know against the only thing I know is Texas seems to bring it out in them. So there's something that they do defensively against Texas. Clemson did as well. Maybe it's orange. I don't know. But it's got something to do with that. They have the ability to play attack style, just pile up tackles for loss and sacks. I know Notre Dame's a team that doesn't allow a ton of those. So, that's kind of where they are. I will say along the defensive line, when they played Clemson this year, they had 2 healthy interior defensive linemen with any experience. And as the season's gone on, they've gotten this guy healthy and that guy healthy, and now they're back to full strength. They've got 5 or 6. So this is kind of more of the defensive line that when you were talking about in the offseason, hey, how good is Georgia going to be? This is the front that you were talking about. So that's another thing that kind of matches up well. They very much are defensively healthier than they've been all season, and most of it comes along the defensive front. But I will say Riley Leonard is the kind of quarterback that has given Georgia trouble this year.
Interesting. Talking about defensive line, Notre Dame's the opposite. They're 3 of their best 4 defensive linemen out for the season. They lost a couple earlier in the year, and then Riley Mills.
It sucks so bad the way college football just takes and gives and sliding scales. It's awful.
Jake, before we get you out here, I mean, look, I know this as a writer and a YouTube guy. Like, we all give our predictions for the game in different times. I don't know where you're at for that, but Georgia's, as we record this, I think it's like a 2-point favorite. They are. What are you thinking about this game right now? You leaning Bulldogs getting the win in New Orleans?
It's hard, man. I think Notre Dame is, when you look at Georgia's path to the championship, and this was the case when the playoffs started, when they laid out the thing. Notre Dame was the number 1 team I looked at and said, this is the worst matchup for Georgia.
Really?
Yeah, and not necessarily from oh my God, this is a horrible matchup for Georgia, but Riley Leonard makes this because of his ability in the design run game, Mike, to kind of pick his way through traffic, to get behind his pads a little bit and pick up some extra yardage. Georgia struggles with that extra hat in the box, grind it out type thing. And, can Riley throw the ball enough? Can Leonard throw the football enough to kind of keep Georgia off of him, and kind of keep Georgia out of the face of the receivers? I don't know. Like that's going to be a big part of it. But I think it's going to be really close. I do. I think it's going to be a very good football game. I really see it, Mike, as kind of a low scoring, but very entertaining. Not all of those 20-17 games are fun to watch.
Sure.
But I think it's going to be, I think it'll look a lot like the Georgia-Texas game if we're being totally honest, score-wise, flow-wise, some exciting plays, some big plays, but also just a lot of really good defense and some teams that show a lot of pride.
I agree with you, Jake, which is probably means it's going to end up being like Georgia Tech. Like, that just seems right. You can't predict these things. Really great stuff from Jake Rowe over at Dogs HQ. Check him out over at dogshq.com. Appreciate you folks for watching. Hit the thumbs up, and as always, we will catch you next time.